Okay, so good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to our Respectful Relationships evening. My name is Sal Valentino. I am the Wellbeing and Personal Development Coordinator, and along with me tonight here we've got Joe Fabrin, our Principal, Shannon Storr, our 10 to 12 Coordinator, Fatini Vase, our 7 to 9 Coordinator, and Anna Salmick, our Deputy Principal of Students. And I think I've named everyone. So thanks for bracing this chilly Melbourne evening. Look, over the last 4 years at our school, we've taken a holistic approach to wellbeing, and part of that approach requires that parents are kept up to speed with all wellbeing matters. Okay, and we do that in different ways. If you look in our Ignatian, most fortnights there'll be an article to do with wellbeing. Often there's a little video attachment that goes with it from our school TV. On the front page of our website, there's a little school TV. It's called, I learned the other day, a widget. Now, if you click on that, it opens up to our school TV program, and it is a variety of parenting, wellbeing issue videos that are done by experts in Australia. Really easy to look at, so please check that out. Another way that we're trying to reach out to you is by running one of these evenings every year. So for the last 4 years, we've chosen a theme, and that theme is usually one that is relevant for the time and also one that your children are learning about. Maybe not at every year level, but at most year levels. So tonight's topic is respectful relationships, and it is one of the 5 pillars that support our whole school approach to wellbeing here at Loyola. So we use this PERMA-H framework, and each letter represents a different aspect of wellbeing: positive emotions, positive engagement, positive relationships, positive meaning and purpose, positive accomplishment, and positive health: sleep, nutrition, exercise. They shape our personal development program and what we try and achieve as far as wellbeing goes. So that's a little snapshot on how tonight came about. It's part of our whole approach to wellbeing. And on that note, I would like to introduce and welcome you to Sue Payne. Sue is from Real Life. She's an experienced educator in navigating healthy, strong and respectful relationships, and she's been presenting to our Year 11 and 12s for the last few years, as well as our Year 10s this year. Tonight, the topics that she's going to talk about are sexual activity in teenagers, what teenagers need and want to know, the effects of pornography and the effects on young relationships, the law, sex, sexting and consent, and how to talk about sex and respectful relationships. I'm glad it's you and not me having this conversation.
Thanks, Sal. I talk a lot to young people about hormones, and I'm feeling a bit hormonal at the moment, actually. So I don't usually talk to them about what happens at the other end. But, so if I melt in front of you, you'll know why. I think it's fairly common to hear people say that the best gift you can give your children is a good education. And when it comes to sexuality and relationships education, it's linked to our values. When children start secondary school, they've pretty much got those family values already entrenched there. And they can be quite different from other people's families. So school can be a very interesting place to be, hearing from other young people and what they think and believe. I think it's really important that parents and carers have some really explicit conversations these days about sexuality and about relationships, because when children know your values and why you hold them, they can be really empowered by that. It helps them develop their own confidence. And of course, we know as adults, their values may change over time. That can happen as we grow into adulthood. But for now, when you're trying to protect them and propel them forward to a successful and productive and happy life in adulthood, it's really helpful for them to have those conversations. And I know they say, oh, awkward, and may not want to have them. But if you start small and slowly build, each time you try, it'll get a bit easier. And I've got some tips that I hope might help you later. But first, some other things to say. Never have our children been more exposed to adult content ever before, and it's just so easy for them to access. Even if they're not looking for it, they'll stumble across it or someone will show it to them. And we're hearing a lot about sexual assault these days, both past and present. So I hope that tonight, with the help of some student questions and comments that I've got throughout the slides, we can share a little bit, or I can tell you a little bit about what I see and what I hear, what they want to know, what young people are exposed to, and how that might be damaging. And of course, finally and most importantly, what you might be able to do about it. But first, a little reflection for yourselves. It helps to dwell on this just a little bit, and I won't probably be able to give you enough time tonight, but I believe there's been a recording being made, so that won't be a problem to get that to you. I'll give you just a minute. If you're here with a friend or a partner, you might like to share. It might make it more interesting that way. Or maybe not, that's okay too. Okay, so most of us are probably not very well prepared to talk with our children about sex, unless we had an amazingly supportive sex education ourselves, and that's fairly rare. Certainly for my generation, and some of you will be younger, I hope that it was better, but I hear that it's probably not. So the thing about doing this in a really conscious way is to recognise what was helpful. If you can think back to those times, was there something that someone said? Was there a particular passage in a book you were given? Something that helped you as you grew up and entered that world of adult relationships? Or even to help you get through puberty? And perhaps more importantly, was there something that was particularly unhelpful and even perhaps a little bit damaging for you? If you can identify that, then making a conscious effort to avoid that with your own children is very helpful for them. So we want it to be a positive focus. So do a little more of that, and perhaps if your children are doing a health topic, for example, that's a good trigger. I'll be speaking to Year 10s, 11s and 12s. I've already had one session with Year 12s. Just asking them, oh, did you have that session? What did you talk about? And maybe start a conversation that way. But preparing for that by completing this. I hope you can you read that at the back? Try to make it as big as possible. According to research, children still think that their parents can be the best source of sex education. So that's heartening for all of us. I'm a parent myself. I have 2 daughters in their 20s and a 19-year-old son, and I know it's tricky business, but don't lose any opportunities they give you to share your values with them and why you hold them. So we all work hard to protect children, and now we have mandatory child safety standards that apply to all organisations that service children in any capacity, and I'm sure you're aware of those. This is the standard that I engage with. So we want young people to be able to directly contribute to what they need to feel empowered. I like to work from the basis then that an informed child is a protected child. Chanel Conscious, I'm sure you're familiar with that name now, said that we live in a rape culture, and that in a Year 10 class, it was a life-changing moment because they realised, she and friends of hers realised what they had been through when they actually just thought it was part of growing up. And so too then, I think possibly did the boys that were the perpetrators of these various assaults. Possibly thought, some of them, it's part of growing up, that it's the culture we live in. So I think it's really important that we understand that a lot of young boys where this happens, they don't see themselves as rapists, and they've never been taught that that's what a rapist is. So a lot of this is going to be about education, and the best way we can do that is not to shame boys. I feel that with the media attention, which is important to affect change, but I feel that with all the attention and the information that's going to be coming through in the programs and the classes and the changes in the law, which I'm sure we'll see, around consent, that there is a risk of shaming young men. They are naturally full of testosterone and sexual feelings. The same hormones that change us into adults are the ones that give us those sexual feelings, and they're growing at a great rate. And so it's normal for them to have them and natural for them to have them, and that curiosity. So I think what we need to be teaching, though, is that desire is great, those feelings are great, but desire doesn't equal entitlement. So it's about education, and we can't do that effectively just in schools. It has to be coming from home, because the messages they're exposed to are mostly in their free time, and I'll come back to that. I think every weekend all around the world, when young people gather in an adult-free zone, and you add alcohol and you add that sexual curiosity and those feelings, there's possibilities for it to spiral out of control. And we're hearing just how often that happens now with all the testimonies. But we want to improve gender relations, and we don't want to create resentment or ask young men to apologise and own behaviour that they didn't perpetrate. You may be aware of other instances in schools and how they're handling this situation. It's very important that we don't put all boys down. So when you have your conversations, yes, we need to be very explicit about respecting decisions and understanding what consent means, but we also need to respect the fact that our young people, males and females, are growing up. The hormones make them feel sexual. That's how life is. Let's try and find the right balance there. It's not always easy. So how can children protect themselves if they don't even understand what's happening? That's come from a Year 9 class. And of course they can't. They can't protect themselves if they don't understand. So they need education. And they need it now because a lot of them are already having sex. So this is the state of play at the moment in Australian teenagers. Every 5 years, La Trobe University does a survey of over 2,000 young people between the ages of between years 10 and 12 in government, private and Catholic schools. And this is the information from the latest survey done in 2018. I'll come back to the unwanted sex, but just to make the point, that doesn't necessarily mean that someone was forced, held down, or there was a weapon involved. It's more of that coercion or the influence of alcohol and peer pressure potentially. There was a study done recently that showed that the pressure on females to have sex if they're in a heterosexual relationship comes from their male partners mostly. The pressure on males to have sex with their female partners comes mostly from their male peers. So, and if you talk to young men about this, they'll tell you that's the case, that there's still that pressure, when are you going to do it? Who are you going to do it with? That sort of thing. So I don't think a lot of this is new. I think if we think back to our own teenage years, We're aware of all of that going on. The difference is what our children, and particularly our boys, are exposed to, which I'll come to. But these are all the good reasons why we must have quality sexuality education in both schools and in our homes. When we give children, even very young children from kindergarten who do body safety programs, when we give them the right language and the correct names for their body parts, it enables them to be able to talk about those if they are being inappropriately touched. It's easier for them to explain if they have the correct language. And it's easier for adults that they might be trying to tell to understand what they mean. So I think with everything that's happening in body safety now in junior years, it's going to change. We're going to see a positive change. But children now that are in sort of early to mid and beyond in secondary school haven't had that intensity of that body safety training, because body safety and protective behaviours training is basically consent training, really. It just comes a different name in secondary school. Sadly, young people are sometimes hear sex for the very first time when they hear about a rape on the news, or some kind of sexual assault that's, whether they're on radio or TV, or it's on Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be. So talking to your children about what a wonderful thing it can be in the right context is actually a really loving and gentle way to introduce sex. Young people need information so that they can be aware of what's going on inside their bodies and understand their feelings, understand the changes, and be confident about that, what's happening to them. I speak to young girls in grade 6 about how their bodies will change during puberty, and a lot of them already have. Sometimes I get there and I think I'm a bit late. But, sometimes girls will start earlier, but, and they'll be worried about being curvy. And to be able to explain, this is supposed to happen when you grow into a woman. That's what's supposed to happen. Your hips are supposed to widen. Why might that be? And then they'll all think and go, oh. And they'll recognise. Instead, this focus on skinny, and they need that opportunity to hear that it's normal and it's natural and okay. It makes them feel much better about themselves. And we need to do that for females because I don't know if any of you heard, I think it got lost in all the COVID news, but there was a study at Monash University on sexuality and behaviour and satisfaction in women aged 18 to 39 here in Australia. And 50% of females reported some form of sexual distress. Half. That's just stunning. The researchers were stunned. And so there's something in there about needing to educate young women about their bodies, I think. There's a lot of negative media messages coming through to males and females about how they should look and how they should act. But before I've got a little video about that and the effect it can have on a young person's thinking. But first I'd like to share with you some of the questions that students ask. So because we've got a range of year 7 to 12 parents here, which is fantastic, I've picked out mostly questions that come from around year 9 and 10. Don't want you, the year 7 parents, to be shocked. They're pretty direct. And that's okay. I think if they can't be direct, then they might not ask at all, because they might not have the right language to ask. So this is through an anonymous question box, so it can't be traced back to them, you understand? Please let me know if you can't see it at the back and I'll read it out for you. Yes.
Oh,
can't see it? Okay.
Can't see anything.
Oh, really?
No.
Oh, that's not good. All right. Well, can you see the text?
I can see the text. I can't make out any words.
Of the students' questions.
Oh, okay. The one in the top left, I can probably just make out. Okay. I'm missing one word. The rest is just a word.
I'll read them out. Is it healthy to swallow cum? On the other side, can a man get an STI from oral sex? Is it normal to not want to do anything sexual if you're in a relationship? And how do I let him know? So these are fantastic conversations that you can have with your children, because you might be able to think of the language that they could use in that moment, whereas they might not have any idea of how to handle that awkwardness. Is it okay to masturbate? Yes, but you need to do better in your spelling. I didn't say that before. This is probably the most common question, does size matter? Over and over I get asked that question. I tell them all, your work's in progress, don't worry about it, your body hasn't finished growing yet. So. And baby, you'll be as big as Dad one day, I said once. And I had a man at the back. That was parent-child night, it's quite funny. People worry about how their genitals look these days. A lot more than they used to. And as I said, they can be pretty direct. What happens if I stick it in her butt? I would typically start with how romantic. So find ways to deal with these questions. And finally, perhaps nervously, what if you don't enjoy any of it? Sex, hand, mouth stuff. Okay. Have a listen to this. It's a little bit about the messages that the media send to our children. Hopefully it's going to play.
I have struggled with my body. Yeah, I feel sometimes really insecure in my own skin about it. My legs, for instance, there's that whole entire trend in the media about the thigh gap. I don't have that. That makes me not normal. That makes me not beautiful. I think I've gotten to the point where I accept that. I don't know. I still kind of struggle with that.
She's not normal because she hasn't got a thigh gap. It's tragic, isn't it? And
I have struggled.
Here's a question I was asked now. I'll read that out too. Is it bad that I and a lot of people use Photoshop to appease our own standards and view of ourselves? So young people photoshopping their images to look more attractive before they post them on their own Facebook sites or Instagram. We have girls as young as 12 and 13 asking doctors for labia surgery so that their genitals look neat. They're risking cutting into nerves that might give them a lot of sexual pleasure in their adulthood so that they look neat. The mind boggles, but that's the situation that we have for some young people. So sexuality in schools, it's part of the broader curriculum anyway. It's in the health curriculum, the respectful relationships curriculum, and it ties in with the child safety standards. So all schools deliver something either in-house or with the help of external providers. It's a great opportunity to ensure that the information is consistent, because in any given class you'll have children with lots of knowledge, not always correct, and then you'll have with very little. And there might be a big difference in their interests as well. So I would typically start a session by saying, this might not be relevant to you right now. You might have other passions in your life, music, sport, art, whatever they might be. You've got your whole adult life to have relationships, particularly intimate ones. But for those of you that are thinking about it, we're going to talk about it, and you can file it away for future reference if it's not appropriate. Typically, if a child is the eldest in their family, in their year level, they're going to perhaps be a little bit less informed than the other children in the class. It's quite often that if there's children with older brothers or sisters, they're going to know more, and it's really hard to avoid that. In family life, you know what it's like. You can't always talk to one child just on their own, and even if you can, then there's often discussion between siblings. So just being aware of it and maybe talking to your older children, it's okay for you to talk about this, but, Sue's only in year 7, she doesn't need to hear this yet. I'll talk to her about that, something like that. You can always enlist them as your supporters in helping their siblings. And of course, school provides support for parents and carers in what you can do at home. It might be that in health classes they come home with some homework, something to do with their body or their feelings or well-being stuff. They're really good opportunities to tap in and ask them what's going on. I better read that one out too. How can we stop or reduce heteronormality? It's frustrating to have the feeling that you're so different from everyone else and will be judged for it. I'm getting a lot of questions about gender and sexual diversity, and young people in schools are talking about this a lot more. And up to 30% in that last secondary school survey indicated some possibility of same-sex attraction or bisexuality, which was a massive jump. So whether that's just an interest and a curiosity, or whether it's because so many people have been feeling repressed to express their orientation or their identity. We don't really know. I guess we'll find out as time progresses, and we'll see how those young people feel in their adult lives. But we need to be sensitive to it because they're at a very vulnerable age, sort of time mentally. And all the wellbeing people across Melbourne in all schools are aware of this. So it's finding that right balance between maybe our personal values and what's actually happening out there. So in the world, it's a fact that some people just don't feel that their body parts, their biological parts, match the way they feel about themselves. That's how it is for them, and it's a struggle. It's a real crisis of identity, and they can really feel very isolated if it's not recognised or at least acknowledged. People who are gender and sexually diverse have much higher rates of feeling isolated, depressed, anxious, attempts suicide. We're talking about serious mental issues when they feel a lack of support. And some of our young people will use language inappropriately, as young people do. They'll say, "Oh, that's so gay." You might have heard people say that, young people say that. So they're insulting someone with that word, which means that someone's standing there listening to that and they're actually feeling like, the way I'm growing and changing, I feel like I might be attracted to the same gender. I'm not going to say anything though, because I just heard that and my friends might not accept me now that I've heard them, with that attitude, and suddenly can feel like their group of friends is lost to them. So just being sensitive, accepting that, some people, are attracted to the opposite sex and some people aren't. And yes, the majority are, and we're not sure why so many more people are attracted to the same sex now, but, let's accept that that's the facts for them. That's how their life is. So recognising too that when young people come out, it takes an enormous amount of courage. And I tell young people, if someone does come out to you, if a friend tells you this, that's a massive compliment to your character. And that's something that we can tell our children. If a friend tells you this, they've shared something deeply personal because they know they can trust you. They see that in you, that you have that character. And I think it helps young people then go, okay, I can be more supportive. I don't have to sort of cross over my boundaries or values just to be supportive to somebody else. So it's a tough challenge for a lot of schools, and we need to sort of all jump on board and help young people feel this way. This one says, it has to hurt the first time, right? What should you expect? Should you be worried about getting sick or pregnant when using protection? What do you think the right age to have sex or be in a relationship is? And finally, a smiley face, and it's super cool to learn about. So that was a Year 9 comment. She took the opportunity to ask lots of questions. If every student did that, I'd be in trouble from a time point of view. But there's lots of topics we need to cover in school and at home. We need to talk about sexual health, STI, sexually transmitted infections and contraception. We need to talk about gender and sexual diversity. We need to talk about helping young people identify their values so that they can live by them and feel that they're living authentically. And we need to talk about influences, and the influence I'd like to raise now is pornography, because it's probably the most damaging that we've got operating at the moment. So, a word about pornography. A few years ago I was asked to write some programs, and one of them was pornography, so they were secondary school units. And I hadn't looked at pornography for a very long time, probably not since I'd seen my brother's magazine or something decades ago. And I thought, well, I better have a look. I need to know what I'm writing about. So I went online and I found online pornography, and I didn't like what I found. I thought maybe, just maybe, I might find something I like. No, I didn't. It was actually very sad, and some of it was horrifying. So I forced myself to watch hundreds of clips that year, and I've kind of tracked it since then and watched sort of the trends that are going on. Not too much, because I have enough disturbing images in my mind for a lifetime. And I do tell young people that once it's in there, you can't get it out, so be careful. But there's three main things that pornography seeks to teach young people, or the messages are that women are available for sex anytime and ready. Apparently our bodies are ready for sex. Like that. We all know that's not true. Some bodies take longer to warm up than others, and so there's that message for starters. Also that men only want women for sex. Men are portrayed just as poorly as women are. They're portrayed as these sort of animalistic, aggressive, soulless kind of individuals. And that's the other thing about pornography. It's very aggressive. The titles are aggressive. It's all about sticking it to her and pounding and drilling and hammering, and it sounds more like Bunnings than, sex and love and relationships. It's really quite horrifying the way it's presented, and it's changing too, because when young people watch pornography and they watch enough of it, it gets a bit boring, so that it needs to be spiced up a bit. It's an ugly billion-dollar industry. It's a lot of behind-the-scenes stuff that goes on is not great. Some people are performing under threat. Not all of them are paid. A lot of their bodies get damaged, and then they're no good anymore. Off you go, and they'll get someone else to come in. Nearly 30% of downloads worldwide on a daily basis are pornography. Nearly 30%. So, it just goes to show how much people want to watch sex. And there's some logic as to why someone might be attracted to want to watch sex, because we're wired that way with these hormones that we have. But we need to know that what we're watching is not accurate and not realistic. So that one of the worst things is that they show this sexy kind of aggression, like aggression is sexy, and that women love it that way. So it's important that we talk about how unwanted aggression is. We're trying to do our best to do that on a more broader scale in the community. I don't think you can have a full conversation with young people about respectful relationships anymore unless you talk about pornography. And I don't think you can even have a really good conversation about pornography, a really effective one, unless you're prepared to share the comparison with real sex. And that's where it gets tricky, because it's hard for parents to talk to their children about real sex. Some statistics for you. So the average age for a young male to see pornography is 13. So that's the average, so it could be earlier. The average age for a female is 15. They're often sent clips by other people. So they may look for it purposefully, intentionally, or they might stumble across it, but that's the average age. More than 50% of boys between the ages of 15 and 20 watch pornography weekly or more. So if you have a son, there's a good chance he's seen it or he's a regular watcher of it. Some kids are traumatised by it, but they don't tell their parents because it's rude. So we've got to get past that, talking about private parts is okay at home. If you've got questions, you can come to us. So how lovely for you to be able to dispel some of the stuff they've seen that's made them feel, so upset. But often they won't tell you because it's rude. So there's evidence around the world of the damage it's doing. I'll just point to a few main things that we need to do. So we can start with just little bits of information. We're not sure if our young people are watching pornography and we don't want to raise the issue as a possibility. We could say, do your friends share images? Do you ever share funny images, or, what other kind of pics do they share? And put it on the friends, blame the friends. Don't ask them directly, it's too hard for them to speak up. And so that might be the first inkling as to perhaps this is being shared. And a lot of the time it's against the law, what they're doing, and they don't realise. This is the most worrying trend in pornography at the moment. The new generation is making incest sexy/hot. There are a lot more clips now, and on the home pages of porn sites as well. There's an increase in what you might call incestuous sex, with titles like Daddy's Little Girl and Mum and the Stepson, or whatever, you name it. They've got all these different titles. And this has come from a Year 10 class. It was a mixed gender, so I'm not sure it's boy or girl. Very worrying trend. Here's a little clip about pornography that might interest you from an expert.
My name is John Fobert. I'm a professor of higher education and student affairs at Oklahoma State University, and I also lead a national nonprofit organization called 1 in 4, which has worked since 1998 to end sexual violence on college campuses and in the military. How is pornography harming our society at large? From 2008 to 2011, exposure among kids under 13 to pornography went from 14% to 49%. Okay, just in those 3 years. Well, what's a big thing that happened? The ubiquity of the smartphone. There's no question that this generation has more access to pornography than anyone in human history ever. How do we describe to people why pornography and violence go together? Pornography is a recipe for rape. And I'm not saying that anytime someone uses pornography, they're going to commit rape. But what it essentially teaches people is that you're supposed to be violent when you're intimate with somebody. There was a study that came out of the University of Arkansas and NYU showing that 88% of scenes in porn movies include violence by one person towards another, usually a man towards a woman. But what I found most interesting about that research is that when someone hits another person in porn, 95% of the time they respond with either pleasure or they have no response at all. So it's teaching this generation that sex and violence are intertwined. The most interesting study I read most recently is one that did brain scans of men while they were watching pornography. They scanned their brains and they wanted to see what areas of the brain light up when men look at porn. It's the part of the brain that deals with objects, not people. The more we dehumanize someone, the more possible it is to commit violence against them. And that's what porn does. I study pornography as a scholar. I look at its impact. And one of the things that frustrates me is people who will say things are in the research that aren't, or they'll question solid research just because it doesn't fit their own opinion. And what they say is the connection between pornography and sexual violence is merely assumed. Well, we have over 50 studies showing a direct link between pornography and sexual violence.
Yeah, so there's not much doubt anymore after the number of studies. And one of the other trends that's emerging too is the violence that women are perpetrating against men in pornography. So instead of trying to improve the situation, it's just what's happening is that they're just, the porn makers are just bringing out, another novelty effect. And the aggression's still there, but it's from females to males. So it's so unrealistic in so many ways. We're not going to stop young people, male or female, watching pornography, but if they're educated about it, then they might not fall victim to some of the problems that they have mentally in terms of addiction. I spoke to a Year 9 coordinator at a very conservative school the other day, and he said, of the 100 boys I've got in Year 9, I'd say 9 to 10 of them have a serious porn addiction. That's 10% with a serious porn addiction. So they'll be off to see psychologists, whom we now have that specialise in porn addiction. We also have lots of healthy young males with normal hormone levels with erectile dysfunction because of the amount of porn they've watched. So, and of course we have young women complaining of painful sex in increasing numbers, attending pelvic floor therapists and gynecologists because they're having sex that they don't enjoy. And so it becomes painful. And then it gets into a cycle and they can't get out of it, and then their body expects pain, and then they have a really big problem to deal with potentially for the rest of their lives. So it's playing out in young relationships who aren't educated. As adults, we can look at pornography and think, okay, take it or leave it, laugh at the absurdity of it, or be horrified by it. But young people that haven't had sex or very much experienced, they have no context for it. So it's very easy to believe if you digest enough of it. So this study was done in South Australia University for 13 to 16-year-olds, which is great because we don't always get a picture of under 15. It's a few years old now, but it was what young people said they wanted to learn about. So hopefully you can see that. So the red lines are for the male and the blue for the female. Violent relationships, top topic young women wanted to know about. The students were in both South Australian and Victorian secondary schools. But equally, they wanted to learn about love. And I'm sure you'll love this comment as much as I do. A young man in Year 10. It's good for young women who see boys mucking around at school and they see them collectively like that and maybe behaving in a way that's a bit off-putting. If they don't have a gentle brother or father, they might never see that soft side, that loving side. So it's good to be able to share those things. And when I talk to the Year 12s here, I say to them that men and boys and men feel just as deeply as girls and women. They're just conditioned not to show it. And then I ask them to put their hands up if they think that's true. And you might get one hand and then two and then nearly, I'd say well over half of the boys then, because that's the question is directed at the boys, will end up with their hands up. And it's good for us to share the positive stuff. What does the law say about consent? It says consent is freely agreed and positively communicated, either by words or conduct. I think they're working now on bringing that to a point where it's got to be a verbal yes. We'll see what happens in that space. We're hearing a lot about enthusiastically affirmative at the moment, and how would we judge enthusiastically? That's a little bit subjective, but that's what we're hearing a lot of. We've also got to make the point that it's informed, so if someone has sex with somebody else but they don't know they have a sexually transmitted infection, then it's not really informed consent, so those questions need to be asked. That consent is also ongoing and reversible. This was one of the questions in the study done by La Trobe University. Alcohol is a part of so many young people's first experience and subsequent experiences of sex, and we need to talk to them about that. They do get education at school about drinking, and I'm sure that most parents talk to their children about drinking too and try to put off that, but we know how interested teenagers are in that kind of grown-up behaviour. But they simply don't know what their tolerance to alcohol is going to be, and often they drink it so quickly that before they can actually measure the effect it's having on their body. So at the very least, if you can encourage them to drink slowly, and to alternate rather than the ban no alcohol, which very rarely works, but if you can encourage them to drink very slowly and take note of the effect it's having on their body and the effect it's having on their mind. What does one drink do? What does two drinks do? And over time, get an idea of their tolerance. This is particularly important for Year 12 students. Next year, they will enter into an environment that will overwhelm many of them. The more sheltered they are, the more overwhelmed they're going to be. It's a free-for-all. It's a big drinking culture, and if they go on an orientation camp in the hope of making friends, they'll throw out condoms like they're lollipops and just say, have fun. So for someone who's coming from quite a sheltered background, they could be very nervous and drink too quickly and find themselves in a situation that they're unable to control. So young people need to be prepared for that. And as parents, you can do that and say, okay, I know you're an adult now, you're 18. I'm not sure if that makes them an adult, really, are you? But anyway, they're an adult, they're going off to uni, they're going to experience all these wonderful things, but, they need to protect themselves so that they have, their life is important, their health is important. And it can be a very overwhelming environment at the first few weeks of university. This one says, why do girls find it hard to say no? And that's a good one to talk about at home. Why it might be that females find it hard to say no in different contexts. And this one, how do you tell someone that you don't want to have sex because you're scared that they might leave you? So again, you can find the right words to explain to them. Do you really want to be with someone just because you let them have sex with you? There's different ways of phrasing it to, sort of make it hit home a little more. You're not a collection of body parts. You're a person, and you're a lovely person, and you deserve better. Some of the things we could teach what consent isn't. Wearing someone down to an absence of no's. That would happen a lot in those environments that we're hearing about where assaults occur. And silence. There's lots of videos out there now on YouTube about consent and for different ages. So depending on the ages of your children, you might want to have a look through and see there's a few that you'd like to watch with children. Pick ones that suit your children well, you know what they're ready for. You could choose one that's, I want to watch this with you and see what you think. I think there's a massive misunderstanding between young men and women with this looking hot thing. So girls are under a lot of pressure to look a certain way. You would know that. There's images all the time coming in at them. You've got to wear the dress like this and the shoes like that and the hair like this and the lips and the nails and the whatever. And if you don't dress like that, well, you know, you're not really with it, are you? You're not really in. So girls will, you know, dress right up if they're going out because they want to look their best. They want to be noticed. They want to be desirable. It's not an invitation to sex. It's not an invitation to touch. But often that's the message that a young male receives. Females are very sexualised. All their body parts are very sexualised. So when they're out there in their short dresses or their breasts are exposed a little bit, lots of males will tell you, young males will tell you, you know, they're asking for it. They want it. Look how hot they look. So, you know, we've got to try and talk to them about, no. Yeah, they love the fact that you've noticed them. Who doesn't want to be noticed? But that doesn't mean that you get to touch them. You know, they're not objects. And that's trying to help young people understand that, you know, the messages might be getting muddled. This is a really cool little clip that I came across. I hope you enjoy it. It's very educational for lots of people.
A gente construiu um vestido todo sensorizado e a gente consegue, através desse vestido, mensurar, no caso das mulheres vestindo ele dentro de uma balada, o quanto elas são assediadas através do toque. E a gente passa essa informação via Wi-Fi para uma central de controle, que faz com que a gente entenda isso em tempo real e dê, na verdade, uma visão de quanto elas são assediadas.
Vai ser legal de ver e de poder mostrar isso depois para as pessoas. Até para conscientizar e para tentar parar isso, né?
Toda mulher já sofreu assédio na vida, mas não tem uma ilustração real do que realmente acontece.
Vamos começar? Pode, né? Ah, não vai dançar não. Vai ser chato, hein?
A mulher não é um bicho que precisa ser encurralada para ser capturada.
Tenta chegar numa boa, conversar sem tocar. Eu sou uma pessoa interessante. Vale a pena você parar 5 minutos e conversar comigo.
Pretty good, isn't it? It's good for young people who might be about to hit that scene to watch, that nightclub scene. So well done, Schweppes. We need to be teaching young people to expect respect. And how do we teach consent? Well, when I grew up, perhaps like yourselves, I was told to treat people how you would like to be treated. But I've been thinking a lot about that lately, and I think that that's probably not the case. What we need to be doing is treating people how they want to be treated. Not everybody wants to kiss Nana. My son's Nana wasn't very happy about that when that happened about 10 years ago. But people have, you know, different feelings about touch and about sharing. And so we have to be mindful that we need to ask, and that someone might not feel the same way that we do. Stop means stop, and if you have a couple of kids at home that are fighting and one says stop, that's your chance to intervene. Did you hear what your brother said? Stop. That means you stop. You know, so we're modelling this all the time, hopefully from an earlier age. Even if it's a tickle. You know, often kids will be, oh, stop. You know, if you stop straight away, they will learn that expectation, and you'll model it for your children watching for them too. It sounds counterintuitive for parents, but encourage them to have an argument with their, you know, if they've got differing points of view with their siblings, you know, be around and nearby, but let them defend their views and be assertive, not aggressive, but not passive either. No touch unless it's wanted, so ask first. And if they seem uncomfortable, and this is, you know, it's a bit harder to notice something like this, and this is what young people struggle with in the moment when it's really hot and heavy and there's, you know, a lot of intensity and there's a lot of feelings. It's hard for one young person to notice the discomfort of another. But if we start modelling that from an early age, if we see our child not looking very engaged in an activity that we're doing, we can notice and respond, and that might over time model it for them too. This is what the law says about consent. So this is something that we can talk to children about as well. And this is the age of consent in Victoria. The age of consent varies, as do the conditions around it, depending on what state you live in. When you tell young people that they can't show sexual images to each other, that that's against the law, you should see the looks on their faces. So it might surprise you to know that between the ages of 12 and 15, it's not against the law for young people to have sex, so long as there's only 2 years within their ages. Okay, so let's do a little quiz. Sexting in the law. So young people don't call it sexting, they call it nudes or nudies or sending nudes or something like that. But the law calls it sexting. So what do you think about the first one there? Can you read that one at the back? No? Your friend in year 8, so I deliver this to a year 9 group, so that might be important for you to know. Your friend in year 8 sends you a nude pic with permission to share. So legally, if you're in year 9, you can A, share the pic, B, keep the pic, or C, neither A or B. Any ideas? What would you say? Most adults would say C, but it's actually B. The child pornography laws were adapted at the end of 2014 to respond to the sheer volume of sexting that occurs within young people, between young people. So if the person who sends it to you is within 2 years of your age, then you can keep it on your phone. But if you've got it on your phone and you then turn 18, you are then a legal adult in possession of child pornography, so you need to delete it when you turn 18. That might be important to let the year 12s know that. What do you think about the next one? If you threaten to show, share, forward or post an intimate image of someone, you can be A, imprisoned for 1 year, B, fined $100,000 or C, neither A or B. Do you think? It's A, which a lot of people are surprised at because it's a threat and it's not necessarily, it's a threat, it's not necessarily an action that's occurred, but the law allows for quite, harsh punishments if necessary. So police have a lot of discretion here, and they will look at the circumstances and whether there was a malicious kind of intent behind things. And the national laws haven't really changed very much. So the national or federal laws can be used, can be applied instead. So young people need to know about this, and it's hard for them to understand sometimes because the age of consent is all around the age of 16. But the sexting laws are around minors, which is under 18. So they need to be aware. And if they ever get confused, or you ever get confused as parents, the Legal Aid Victoria website's fantastic for all that information. It's really clear and easy to read. And the final one, sharing a nude picture with another person is legally allowed without permission if A, the person is over 18, B, if the person is in a relationship with you, C, both A and B, or D, neither A or B. What do you think? D. Yep, it's D. So You can never share a picture without an adult's permission, and if they're under 18, even if they give you permission, you can't share it. Okay? So the law says that children under 18 are not in a position to give permission for their image to be shared. So teenagers are breaking the law all the time in this regard, and they really need to know what it's all about. But anyway, so to summarise, it's okay to take a nude pic of yourself and keep it on your phone. It's okay to send one, so long as they're within 2 years of your age. This is all for minors. It's okay to store it, so long as they're within 2 years of your age. And it's only of the one person that sent it to you. It can't be of somebody else, of course. But it's not okay to store it if you turn 18. It's never okay to forward it. And asking someone to send you a picture, which happens frequently, or sending a picture yourself that hasn't been asked for, is not against the law in itself the first time. But if there's repeated asking or sending, then that's sexual harassment. And it's important to give young people the language that they can use if they're under that kind of pressure. You know, they could text back, that's sexual harassment, and that might actually stop, you know, rather than just saying no. So lots of questions about this in secondary school. I asked some boys, they're in year 9 at a different school, what do they think about all these assaults that are going on? And this is what one of them said. And after he said this, there was 2 boys up the front, and one boy turned to the other and said, "Yep, that happens a lot." And the boy said, "Does it?" He goes, "Yeah." He went, "Oh." Where did they get this information? Some of these ideas are really persistent. They won't go away. And young people share them. You know, it's much easier to think that than the real unpleasantness that's going on, because it's uncomfortable to face, you know, what the reality is. But we have to delve into that discomfort if we're going to uncover the factors and make a difference. This is a little bit of information from White Ribbon. So when you're listening to this, have a think about the people that surround your child. And I don't just mean at home or at school, I mean in the broader community.
The causes of violence are very complex, but they have to do with life within a male-dominated society, with the impossibility of living up to it, and with individual men who just are living that out within their relationship.
But the truth is that men who are most likely to physically, psychologically, and sexually abuse women are those who have patriarchal attitudes and beliefs, and who belong to peer groups that encourage and justify violence against women.
So in driving prevention of gender-based violence, it is about saying that all people, women and men, are equal in our community.
The majority of men in Australia don't commit acts of violence against women, but the majority have been silent. And through our silence, we've allowed the violence to continue.
But if more people stood up and said no, that's not acceptable, starting with sexist jokes and sexist comments, I think that goes a long way to making an attitudinal change.
But it's hard to stand up in front of your peers and correct them. You might have remembered an incident on a bus with some students from another college recently. And this was the boy that called the school to inform them. So this boy, his name's Ben. I haven't met Ben, I don't know what he looks like. I was pretty impressed that he did what he did, but this is what he said afterwards. So that's a 15-year-old boy's words. That's what's building the culture of toxic masculinity. You wouldn't have expected a 15-year-old boy to say something like that, would you? But that's the sort of stuff that we're talking about now. Where did it all come from? Where did all this toxicity come from? This is the big difference between this generation, our children now, teenagers now, and all the generations before them. It's what they're exposed to. this dismissive attitude towards women, dismissive at best, violent at worst, and lots of in-betweens. This sort of misogynistic lyrics in music, what they see in pornography, through social media, the attitudes that are shared there. YouTube is full of adult content. If you've got primary school children, be very careful when they jump onto YouTube. They often do so to find funny little clips and things, but the amount of stuff they can come across is quite frightening. I'm sure the video game producers would say, well, you can't blame video games for sexual violence against women. And the pornographers would say, you can't blame a clip about sex for rape. But if you think of how many hours your child, male or female, but let's say mostly male for some of these, engages in this in one day or in 1 week, we're talking about many, many hours. And it's mostly uncontrolled time, if you like. And I know you can't just take away their phones and their access to the world, but they're hearing these same messages through, at least 5 different sort of ways. And, when you hear enough of it and your brain is still growing and shaping and it can have a huge effect. So it's not just pornography, it's not just the music lyrics or just video games. If you've seen Grand Theft Auto, then you'll know how bad it can be. It's the collective assault. That's what I worry about. And that's what previous generations weren't exposed to. It's hours and hours and hours of misogynistic kind of attitudes. A lot of this comes from America, a lot of what they engage with. And here's what a few professionals over there think about masculinity in America.
Stop crying.
Stop with the tears.
Don't cry. Pick yourself up.
Stop with the emotion.
Don't be a pussy.
Don't let nobody disrespect you.
Be cool and be kind of a dick.
Always keep your mouth. Nobody likes a tattletale.
Bros come before hoes.
Don't let your woman run your life.
You a bitch.
What a fag. Get laid. Do something.
Be a man.
Be a man.
Grow some balls.
The 3 most destructive words that every man receives when he's a boy is when he's told to be a man.
We've constructed an idea of masculinity in the United States that doesn't give young boys a way to feel secure in their masculinity, so we make them go prove it all the time.
Within their peer group culture, each of them is posturing based on how the other boys are posturing, and what they end up missing is what they each really want, which is just that closeness.
In good times, guys are really close to each other, but when things get a little bit worse, you're on your own.
From middle school, I had 4 really close friends. Once I kind of went into high school, I struggle finding people I can talk to because I feel like I'm not supposed to get help.
Our kids get up every morning. They have to prepare their mask for how they're gonna walk to school. A lot of our students don't know how to take the mask off. What is it you don't let people see? Almost 90% of you have pain and anger on the back of that paper.
If you never cry, then you have all these feelings stuffed up inside of you, and then you can't get them out.
Steve Biddulph, whom you've probably heard of, a bit of a guru in the raising boys, and he's written a lot about girls more recently too. He has quite a bit to say about the masks that men wear. I don't do speeches just on masculinity. It's not my area of expertise, but it's so intrinsically linked to sexuality that I find constantly I'm looking at that kind of material. So just briefly, Aussie masculinity, traditional Aussie masculinity just doesn't work for all boys and men all of the time. So we have to expand our concept of what it is to be a man. A lot of the human qualities that we praise and revere in some people, mainly females, caring and compassion and kindness and sensitivity, we deny boys access to those. And then they get frustrated and angry, and then we get upset with them because they're angry. But they have to have a way of expressing that, to access to all of those qualities. All this toughen up attitude, represses all of that. And it's not helping them, obviously, and it's not helping relationships. And that whole idea of that self-soothing mechanism. Crying is a self-soothing mechanism we've been given. It's a gift, really, part of our makeup, our physiological makeup that allows us to soothe ourselves. There are chemicals that are released, and I'm sure that's where that good cry sort of notion comes from. It's cleansing, it's soothing. So when you don't give young males access to that either, how do they vent their feelings? How do they express them? There's lots of conversations you can have within the family, sometimes with all the children if they're close together in ages, maybe not sometimes. You can have different conversations. I'm going to put up this slide, but I won't get you to read through it. I've actually got it as a handout, so if you're interested, take one as you leave tonight. So it's just about the things we can talk about from a young age to help shape their values. And remember, if you're not doing it, someone else out there is shaping your child's thinking. When we're talking with young people, we've got to remember it's an adolescent brain. It hasn't fully matured yet. There's a lot less impulse control. They're known for not being able to see the potential outcome of their actions. So you might have to repeat the conversation a few times. I'm sure you already know that. Before you talk about specific things, have a chat to the other parent or carer of your child. Try to present the similar values. You might have different opinions on some things, but to be able to share together your values. Some young people are very aware of what's going on in the media at the moment. That's what I hear in the classroom, and others are completely clueless. They're not interested. They never watch the news, so they don't know anything about it. So you might have to start at different points. But now's a good time to ask your teenagers, are they aware? What do they think of it all? Have they heard anything, seen anything? Do their friends talk about it at school? It's hard sometimes, but it's best to approach with curiosity. It's not about giving a lecture. And there are lots of great resources out there. And so have a look at YouTube and see what's available. There's some fantastic books now, so you can sort of take your time and look through that. I've got some websites up here as well at the end. But, as I said, we'll get the slides to you. I have found that the best way to speak to my children is in a trapped environment like the car. One of my daughters really wanted to hear a lot about everything to do with sex and relationships, and the other one not very much. So if I had them both together, I made sure that the other one was hearing it even though she didn't want to. But they can see a lecture coming a mile away, can't they? So instead, if I hear something that I really want to make some comment about, I'll just say, "Oh, seriously?" And I'll just call that out and just keep driving, or just keep doing what I'm doing in the kitchen. And they can't help themselves. They're so curious. What? They'll start asking me, why? Same thing. Absolutely, right on. And then, what? Right on about what, Mum? That kind of thing. So I found that to be very helpful. There's always relationship dramas on, and Home and Away, and Neighbours, and you've got so many triggers out there. The Bachelor. If you watch that rubbish, and I must admit, I used to call it rubbish. I would think, oh, what a load of rubbish! This maths and Bachelor. And I discovered this is a magnificent chance to get an insight into how my son thinks. Otherwise, he would never have shared those thoughts with me. So I'd sit there and we'd watch this behaviour. And he'd talk about what he thought about it. And so for a while, one of my older daughters was living with us too, and they would then have their own discussions about what was okay. And she'd be educating him because she was 10 years older and wanted to, tell him everything that she learned along the way. But again, making comments where they can't help themselves. They've got to know, what do you mean it's not reality? That kind of thing. And I think when you hear them talking about stuff or engaging with stuff at home, it's often easier to be able to ask them what their friends are doing. And I think I made that comment. Do your friends talk about this? Or do the kids at school, it don't even have to be your friends, do the kids at school talk about this? What do you think? This is what I think. There are some YouTubers out there that are delivering enormous amounts of information to young people. They're just one person's opinion. And I heard my son a couple of years ago, he was listening to someone And I wasn't really paying attention because I was working in the other room, and then I heard this guy saying, all these feminists just have to calm down. Well, I was up in the other room. Who said that? He goes, what? And I said, well, just who are you listening to? It turns out this guy, it's just some random guy in his 20s with opinions. He's got 500,000 followers, teenage boys. Some of them have millions of followers. Scary stuff. Create your own opportunities. Make them up as you go along. Just get them talking. When you're responding, try not to judge. Often they are quite disturbed by what they've heard or seen, and they need a supportive ear. I'm assuming you can see these bits here. Yep. It's a good opportunity to talk about credible sources of information. And this works well. Congratulate them on, good on you for coming to me. That must have been hard, Well done. I'm so proud of you. Very mature. And you might be sitting there shocked to the core of what they've just told you. But trying not to react too strongly is important. I've learned this one from being in classes where a student might ask something that's really right outside of that year level's, the parameters of that year level, for example. So, a grade 6 person putting their hand up and saying, what's a blowjob? You could put that in the question box for me and we'll deal with that next week. And of course, some questions in primary school never get dealt with. That's in consultation with the school. But you can always say, if they ask you something and you're not sure, you just say, that is a really good question. But can you give me a little bit of time because I'd like to give you a good answer. I just want to think that through and maybe even get some information for you. And making sure you go back to them, of course. Try not to make the mistake of, let's look that up together and find things that you really wish you looked at first. Make that mistake more than once. And always checking in with them. They've come to you, which is fabulous. So giving them that other opportunity. It's hard for young people to raise these issues with their children. It's awkward. It shouldn't be, but it is. So often for both of you. Of course, I've gone out of time, but I'll just leave you with a little bit more. You have a right to share what you know, and you know lots. So, yes, your child will turn off, but, to be able to say to them, no, I really want you to listen to this. I really want to be able to help you. I know you're exposed to heaps of stuff out there, and I can tell you what's fact and what's fiction. And just try to find a way to connect with them and let them know that you have that knowledge. Some of these things I'm sure you know yourselves already. But one of the things that I think we all need to do is start to appreciate them more for the human qualities that they're going to need when they're adults and get the focus off the looks. It's natural to say to your daughter, oh, you're beautiful, something like that. But the reality is that what they need to hear is about, the person that they are on the inside. Because there's already way too much focus on looks, and their idea of beauty is going to be much more around what they hear in their peer group anyway. You're just mum and dad, of course you can say they're beautiful. So, but if you can praise those other things that will really help them, and in boys and girls equally, we should all be able to be kind and compassionate, not just girls one way and boys strong and tough and all that sort of stuff. So it's a good opportunity when we're talking to them to praise those things. These are some websites you might be interested in getting some information or resources from. There's some really good resources through some of these, but I won't explain them all. I'll bring it to a close because I've gone over by a couple of minutes, and I don't know if you have questions or not. I'm more than happy to answer them, but otherwise I'll leave it at that and stop listening to my voice for a while.
So we might open it up to some questions. I'm sure that you may have lots to say.
Yes.
I know this is going to sound like an unusual question given the content,
I get lots of unusual questions.
In simple terms, if we need to talk to the kids about this, and even just for ourselves, What's the simple definition of what is pornography?
Well, I think just pictures or videos of naked people or people having sex. And it's made with the intention of arousing people, sexual arousal, but you can stop at the pictures of, just depending on the age and, yeah. If young people don't understand why that would be attractive, it means that those sexual feelings haven't really developed in them yet, because they'll look at you like you're mad. What? Anyone? But other times they go, and then you know that they're well aware they've got those feelings in them. Yep.
I'm a registered nurse for 45 years, so I've come across a lot of people who've been affected by pornography, prostitution, etc. And over those 45 years, I never met one person that didn't have psychiatric problems because they'd been abused, they'd either been sexually raped or victim of incest. And I think it's important for the older children to understand that they're actually seeing people that are in an industry where they're terribly abused. Because they look at it and they think it's normalised, that it's actually, because it's readily available, that it's okay, and they don't understand that there are people that have gone through such trauma.
Thank you. Yes, that's a really good point to make. Yeah, it's a really ugly industry, isn't it? Any other questions? Yes.
You mentioned before about the signals that, girls and boys interpreting those signals.
Yes.
And we are living in a highly sexualised community, dressing up and all that.
Yep.
I think you said about dressing up, especially for girls. It's like how do you guide? Boys receive those signals, obviously.
Yes.
How do you then shape that world for a girl?
Yeah.
So that
because they don't want to be invisible. Nobody wants to be invisible.
How do you balance that? Obviously, they're developing, but at the same time, that element of modesty.
Yes.
Is that even taught anymore? Is that even?
I don't know whether it's explicitly taught. I think those are the sorts of things we teach in our families because our values can vary from family to family, and we want to instill what we think is important. We're not going to stop girls from dressing up, and we're not. All we can do is educate so that they know that for the boys that don't understand, that's what they might think when they see you like that. Just be aware. But we need to educate boys that this does not mean it's an invitation to touch. Okay, they're responding to their peer pressure and the social media stuff and everything else about this is how you look. This is how you look good. And it may be. As girls get older, that they are looking to hook up. That may be their choice, but we need to make it clear that it doesn't automatically mean that. A girl said to me recently, so I really love fishnet stockings, but I can never wear them because they've got this kind of stigma to them. And she said, I just love the pattern, I think it's really cute. But she said, I've only worn them once and I had all these people make comments, so I've never been able to wear them again. And I thought, yeah, it's sad, but it's true. There is stigma around certain things, and it just gets down to educating over and over and over, I think. Yeah.
Do you use criminal cases as examples?
No, not generally. Sometimes if we've got a lot of time to look at things like sexting, then there's some examples out there that we can talk about, the crime that was committed and who ended up being affected through that and what the penalty might have been. But typically it's not something we do. I think the police have their education arm, and when they do I think they do quite a bit on cyber safety and things like that, and they talk about it from that point of view. I'm not sure how much they talk about sexual assault though. Yeah, it's a good point.
So, no more? So I was frantically taking notes, and I was going to recap what you said, but I gave up because you've shared so much with us, from resources, tools, strategies, facts. It's been amazing to take all that in and to hear that. So we're going to make this video available, and maybe a summary of the presentation as well. And please, if you have any other questions, don't hesitate to reach out to us, and we can try and support you as best as possible. But on behalf of everybody, thank you so much for your wonderful presentation.
It's a
We've
pleasure.
got a lot out of it.